Welcome back to Horns Eye Studios for another episode of 666 Seconds of Murder. That means each one of these videos is less than 666 seconds or 11 minutes and 6 seconds. So let's get to it. Got a lot to talk about on this episode for you. Going back out to Idaho, talking about this case and these two. Oh my gosh, the internet just can't get enough stories about Dylan and Bethany. But I want to know, why are they getting a pass? Now remember, before we get going, this video is for informational purposes only. These are my opinions and speculation. I'm not saying anyone's guilty or innocent. That's for a court of law to decide. So we're just talking about a case that interests us. Now, the questions that surround both Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk have been just nonstop among the true crime community. Most people think, back on when they first heard about this case, and this is including myself, the first thing I questioned was, wait a minute, there were two survivors? What's going on with that? And it makes sense to question how the two of them could have survived this brutal attack. I mean, most incidents like this don't leave survivors. I mean, look at the Putnam County massacre in Ohio. Multiple victims over 3 separate crime scenes. No survivors. And that's just the first one that came to mind when I was putting these notes together. There's countless others. Now, if there are survivors, then usually they were hiding and the attackers just didn't find them. But that didn't happen in this case. Both of them were supposedly in their rooms while the events happened. At first, law enforcement made it seem like it was no big thing. They just slept through it, didn't see anything. But then something changed, and it seemed that law enforcement needed an eyewitness. They needed someone to corroborate their timeline of the crimes happening between 4 and 4:25 a.m. Now, this was supposedly determined from them investigating the phones of Dylan and Bethany. Now, this is possibly how they came up with the video evidence of that white Elantra circling the neighborhood multiple times. And I mentioned in another video that Detective Tolson is accused of changing the timestamp on a video on a case that happened in Bonners Ferry, which is a couple of hours north of Moscow, but less than 2 years earlier. So watch that video on Idaho State Police that I did. Strangely, the PCA refers to Suspect Vehicle 1. Alluding to the concept of more than one vehicle. So where was the other vehicle? Who was in the other vehicle? That's always confused me. If there's more than one, then is Brian Kohberger just the first of a group that's going to now be, put into the hot box with him on this crime? I mean, with the gag order in place, we have no idea. Now, speaking of the damn gag order, doesn't that seem incredibly convenient to have a gag on all the information in this case? I mean, I've said it before, but I've never seen a case where the information is so tightly guarded. I mean, why is that happening? If they believe that Brian did this all by himself, then what is the purpose of the gag order? I mean, I've heard that Brian wants it lifted, but now the prosecution is pushing back, and the judge still has to make a ruling on it, as far as I know. But it just doesn't make any damn sense. I mean, I use the Murdoch trial as an illustration of a modern case, very high profile, that you had the 911 call. You had 3 different police interrogations of Alex, and more than that. But those things, I mean, there was all kinds of stuff on this case out there. And everything went fine. He was convicted and put in prison for life. Now, I also find it concerning that law enforcement has ignored Bethany because of her account not jiving with theirs. I mean, that fiction can be fun theory about how all this happened that night. I mean, the frozen shock phase and the clad in black memories from Dylan. But Bethany, if she has this exculpatory evidence, that's something that would favor the defense. So no wonder why Bill Thompson just doesn't seem very interested in her. But if there is evidence that would prove Brian did not do this, then I just want to know how the hell it is not required to make that well known so that an innocent person doesn't go to prison. I mean, this is just insane to me. Or worse, in this case, put to death. Wouldn't it be better to get that out now and avoid years of waiting around only to find out that someone saw something completely different? I mean, we've heard that Bethany saw a naked man run through the sliding glass door. If it is exculpatory, and maybe he was a different race or body type, some way to prove that it wasn't Brian. Now, in addition, in the hearing on Friday, we heard Ann Taylor say that she didn't know how law enforcement came up with Brian's name at first. I mean, this is a person that's been involved in this case knee deep since a year ago, more than a year ago. And she has absolutely no idea how they came up with Brian's name. I mean, that's just unbelievable to me, how that isn't something that has to be brought up right out of the box. When somebody is accused of a crime, the police should have to show their work, just like some fourth grader in math. I mean, how do you determine the defendant was a suspect? To me, that's like number 1 point. So most of us creators make videos about Dylan and Bethany. We're used to the trolls, criticizing us for bringing their names up and the whole poor Dylan, poor Bethany stuff. And I understand that this has got to be a tremendously difficult thing for anybody to go through. But how could a person who claims to be friends with these victims not want to go to court and make sure they help put that person who did it in prison or in front of a firing squad? I mean, I just don't know, because I know I would if they were my friends. I can't believe that they would be that, callous about it. Now, I'm sure a major reason both of them have not spoken out to the media is obviously the gag order and the fact that they have legal representation. I mean, it's the smart thing to do, but I would think that some sort of statement through an attorney could possibly put some of this stuff to bed. That is, if they didn't do anything, and that's why I think maybe they're not saying anything. Now, another major reason why I suspect that this could be the case is I think this was part of a drug hit. I've talked about that in my Lambs to the Slaughter video, and obviously that would scare the hell out of anybody, seeing what they did to those 4 people. So, you just have to wonder here. But, if that happened, I can see why they're afraid to say anything. So why do so many people give Dylan and Bethany a pass on this one? I mean, despite all the questions and very shady behavior, is it because they're hypersensitive and afraid to be labeled as victim shaming? To me, they're not victims. I mean, the 4 that were leaving that place in body bags were victims here. It's quite possible the 2 of them could have played some kind of part. I mean, I just don't know. And when you think about the case with the Kansas City 3 going on right now and Jordan Willis, I mean, that guy's catching all kinds of hell from people, and rightfully so. But nobody's, saying poor Jordan because he didn't, find these people in his backyard for 2 days. Whereas, Dylan and Bethany, for those 8 hours, just seem to get a pass. It doesn't seem right. Definitely a double standard going on here. I mean, is it because they're female? What if those were 2 frat boys in the house that survived? Would they be able to claim they didn't hear 4 people getting butchered? Or would they be in a jail cell next to Brian? I mean, that's what I think they would be. What if they were men of color? Would they be put in even more of a spotlight than these two? I'm sure they would. I mean, we can only speculate, but two white college girls are going to get a lot more sympathy than, let's say, a couple of football players or frat boys or both. I know that most of you agree with me when it comes to Dylan and Bethany. I mean, we just don't trust them at all. I mean, how much of that is due to law enforcement and that ridiculous PCA? I mean, that's really where it all started, and probably even before that when they said that they slept through the whole thing at first. It looks suspicious when the stories change and that Bethany was not included in any of that PCA. I mean, why wouldn't you put both accounts in there? Unless, of course, they don't coincide with each other. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'm sure you'll let me know about this one. I want to thank the members of the Horns High Club. You guys are awesome. I appreciate that support very much. I appreciate all you guys that watch. We'll see you next time on 666 Seconds of Murder.